Thank you everyone for joining this morning. So, Museums and Archives, programming for a new normal. We've done all that. So what I'm hoping to go through today is starting with why are we here? Thank you to those of you who came back with the survey responses, because that really helped me to get a sense of where you are. And there was a real mix in terms of what people have been doing and what they're planning to do over the next coming months. All with the proviso of course, if COVID has taught us anything, it's that you can plan all you like, but be prepared to pivot and turn. We're going to talk to Damien. Thank you, Damien, for joining us. It's an inspiring case study from Hastings. Then we're going to look through COVID, what the impact has been, the response of museums and archives, your plans, your challenges and opportunities, and what the key considerations are going forward. So in terms of why, I thought part of the reasons why some of you might have joined us today were that you're, well, I mean, I can tell you these are some of the things that I've certainly been feeling over the last 7 months. And they're a sense of feeling nervous, a loss of control, needing to manage change, not sure what is possible, or you're finding a way back to work from furlough. And I think they're all things that all of us can identify with. Again, I am going to look to you all for please give me a thumbs up if this, all sounds familiar, or if it's not at all relatable, feel free to switch off. Ultimately, what I'm hoping the aim of this session is to provide you with an opportunity to think about your work in the context of what your local authority will be prioritising. And I thought that this quote was particularly relevant, and it's that plans are nothing, but planning is everything. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but it's the sense that you can have as many plans as you like on paper and hidden away, but actually it's the process of thinking about the environment that we're now working in that's most important. I also thought it'd be useful to tell you what we're not going to cover. As Yvette mentioned, we have 90 minutes, which is quite a short period. And much in all, as I would love to talk to you about tools and processes and give you lots of standard graphs and tools to walk away with, I'm not going to do that today. And we're not going to talk about Prince 2. I may mention Pestle, so bear with me, or SWAT, but we're not going to go into those in detail. We're also not going to talk about management approaches or specific leadership skills. We may touch on them. And we're also not going to today look at impact measurement, but hopefully we will do that in the future session. So I think that's a good point at which to introduce Damien. So Damien Etherington, I hope I've pronounced that correctly.
It's good enough for me.
Thank you. Moved to Hastings in September 2018 to take on a new role that combined managing the museum. Oh, I'm going to stop sharing. Sorry, Damien. Took on a new role managing the museum and a wider remit to promote cultural activity around the town. Before this, he was senior curator for Colchester and Ipswich museums, and he previously worked on collections and engagement projects with National Museums Scotland, East Lothian Heritage Service, and Heritage Eastbourne. So Damien, over to you, and please correct me on the pronunciation of, I'm assuming it's your surname.
Yeah, that's fine. It's perfect. It's an English name against a Scottish voice, so it always seems a bit strange. Working in Hastings, which is also a bit, I've been around, let's put it that way. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me this morning for a very quick whistle-stop tour around what was Hastings Digital Museum. I've also going to add in a little bit then around how we managed to negotiate local government processes and silos to allow us to do that, because as you can imagine, local governments, as you all know, local governments can be quite restrictive. And just in case it's not that exciting for you, I've also hidden through the presentation some Waldos from Where's Wally, so feel free to count them as you go as well. So really as an introduction to the museum, Hastings is a small local authority funded museum here on the south coast. The town itself is around 96,000 people, and it's in the 13th poorest town in England, or the most deprived town in England. The museum has 8.4 full-time equivalent staff, and we've got quite a broad range of collections to use. In terms of Hastings Digital Museum, it was our response to COVID-19 and lockdown. We established it on the 17th of March, and its aim was to reduce social isolation and loneliness that we thought would be made worse by lockdown, already in the town in the area that's above average indices of social isolation and loneliness. Its purpose was to give meaningful cultural activities using the museum's collections and resources to people during the lockdown period. We initially came up with the idea just as we were starting to see headlines like these coming in from Europe in the weeks before lockdown. So it wasn't, it was a week, 2 weeks before we got together as a team and we had a discussion, and we, based on some assumptions, which such as after 12 weeks of lockdown, everything will be back to normal. We'll do something for 12 weeks, it'll be fine. But also more important things like our website wasn't very good and still isn't very good for engaging people or for using it for activities like that. So we thought, how could we do that? And we decided on using Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and the hashtag Hastings Digital Museum. We then developed activities based on core audiences that we have. Starting with families and children, we tried to recreate activities that the museum did on a regular basis. So Starling's music group happened every Friday. We pre-recorded a number of those with Crystal, and then when we ran out of those, we got videos made at home of staff singing and put them out every week. We have a Lego Innovation Studio, so we have quite a lot of Lego activity at the museum. So again, every week we produce various and changing Lego activities people to get involved in. And we also did things like singing, crafts, drawing, storytelling, all of which was aimed to get people working and speaking to their children at home and engaging with each other. Initially, for the first few weeks, we got quite a lot of responses, like this really good drawing of a dinosaur. But as time went on, that public sharing that people were doing at the start of lockdown diminished, and we started to worry about whether we were reaching people. But when we started to dig deeply into what posts were getting accessed and how people were using them, we could see that actually the opposite was happening. People were still looking at them, still using them, actually in increasing numbers. What they weren't doing was doing the public responses that we became familiar with quite early on. We developed a strand that was about bringing people of all ages together and giving them something to do, because we thought how in families be stuck in a house together, there might be grandparents all the way down to babies. And so we developed some online digital games, which ended up being really popular with younger adults and teenagers, particularly for Zoom parties. And some of those activities were really popular internationally, and then certainly we could track around 10 to 20% of people taking part were coming from abroad, which we hadn't ever thought about. The For All strand also includes developing new skills and doing things over a longer period of time. So we developed paper making, costume activities, photography courses, and sign making workshops. The sign making workshop activity on its own then got picked up by LGBT groups up and down the country and teachers networks, and as a standalone activity has been accessed over 1.3 million times by schools up and down the country, which is just staggering amounts of figures. Um, we also wanted to work with older adults who we knew might be isolated, might be on their own, and might not find those other activities that exciting for them. So we put on activities that delved or dived a little deeper, got beneath the surface. And so we had things like curator discussions. We talked about ethical approaches to display of collections. We had we had collection shorts, we had lectures, and we had various things that looked and built on our expertise and knowledge and shared it with people. We also wanted to bring, as a local museum focusing on community, bring groups together across the museum. So we developed a number of community art projects using art-based activity and photography. The most successful and the one that got the most notice was Hastings Digital Quilt, which now means that we're getting a regular income because it's up in Art UK and people are buying it to recreate and redo additional cultural or community activity with groups. Like many museums around the country, we also responded. We responded both to the journals and to Black Lives Matters, or to the pandemic, Black Lives Matters. We have collected over 70 journals in so far. Some people are continuing to do them, and that's just recording everyday life during pandemic. For Black Lives Matters, we knew that was a big movement. We knew that we had to do something, but we also knew as a group of white people, we weren't the right people. So we commissioned and we produced a series of micro commissions with local Black and minority ethnic creatives, and that's still a program that's going on now. So we let them use their platforms and their voice to amplify their voice. In terms of non-public activity, we knew people wouldn't be able to access digitally, and we knew there was much more, or many more vulnerable groups in the town. So we partnered with various charities, organisations, home education groups, and refugee groups, and we either funded activity for them by buying art packs and things, or we developed bespoke resources for them to use, for those organisations to use with their clients. We were able to do that because very early on and totally unexpectedly, we received funding from the Chalkcliffe Trust of £5,000, who said, there's some money, spend it. And we also managed to repurpose some Arts Council money that we had for a grant earlier in the year. In total, our activities cost us around 7,000 for 24 weeks of activities, which included employing over 30 freelancers to develop over 40 activities during that time. Impacts, I'll leave it at one. We went from 100,000 people seeing Hastings Museum on their phones, laptops, or iPads last year to 1.9 million, over 1.9 million for the 24 weeks of the lockdown period. So slightly more successful than we ever thought it was going to be. In that process, there were a number of challenges, and as you all know, there are, as local government organisations and funded by larger organisations, a number of restrictions in place and corporate priorities and processes that we had to try and work our way around. So in the longer term, we've been building up the trust of the comms team over a number of years now. We've been doing lots of proactive press releases and activities involving them, branding it very much as this is helping you get your message about the council out. We've been clear about what it is we're wanting to do and why we've been doing those activities, and tying it really closely into what are the objectives and aims of the council to do that, how we're delivering on corporate strategies and policies. We've also, when the chances came up, really got involved in internal debates around policy and approaches and reviews to comm strategies and things that allowed us to show that we know what we're talking about. And that seems to have been the biggest concerns colleagues had. Why is the museum doing that? They don't know what they're talking about. More quickly, and especially during the lockdown museum, we worked through freelancers and other organisations to promote our activities using their platforms. So we can't use Zoom. I'm on my own laptop at the moment, but we ran lots of Zoom activities working with freelancers. We can't use YouTube. We got other organisations to use that. We can't set up our other more accounts than what we've got at the moment. So we used freelancers to do that, and we promoted it all. So we worked around it that way. Another thing was to bypass those immediate gatekeepers who said no and go straight to the top decision makers and say, we need to do this, we need to do it now, and given a rationale, and that worked really well. In terms of that, kind of builds into what we've been doing. I said in the longer term, we've been building up trust. And as I say to everyone, if we're not going to shout about ourselves, no one else is going to shout for us. So advocacy is something that we've built on really hard over the last 2 years, which is when I started. And that was not just within the council organisations, but also with local funders, strategic partners, arts organisations, so that when we were trying to do things and we were trying to push the barrel, we were able to build on that good, those people having trust in what we're doing and delivering on it. So things that we did in advocacy wise was monthly I send highlight reports to senior officers and council leadership. I share regularly around and attend lots of meetings and sharing what we're doing, and also make sure that we're promoting other organisations through our networks and channels as well, so that they feel that they're part of something bigger. And then finally, what lessons did we learn? Because I know we're pushing on the 10 minutes. And that's really is responding as quickly as important, but actually it's not as important as understanding why you're responding. So we spent a bit of time to understand the purpose and the rationale behind what we were doing, and then went with that through all of the activities. If you understand that and you have that nailed down at the start, it makes developing activities which achieve that much easier. Making mistakes and things being a disaster is all part of the process, and don't be put off by that. There are many things that we did wrong which don't appear online anymore because we took them down, including a Eurovision themed quiz which got banned for copyright infringement from the Greek authorities, but that's another story entirely. And make sure you have some understanding of the platforms. We delved into it, but like many organisations saying we'll use platforms and just put everything across everything. But as time has gone on, we've learned about the subtleties of each program and each platform, which has meant that we could then start to target activities more to each of the platforms to get the best possible results in terms of engagement. That's not as hard as it sounds, especially at the moment. There's lots of free training that you can get and take advantage of, and there's lots of YouTube videos that you can Google and look at. And linked to that is upskilling everyone as you go. Don't just rely on one person in the team to be able to put the videos on. Spread that out. Certainly my team, some were working at the crematorium, some were in housing, some were in the community hub, and we took turns as a team working in those other key council services. So we had to distribute out the ability to work across in those teams. And then where I'll finish is really on why it's worthwhile. So these are the activities that we did, and this is the feedback that we received. We said we set out to make a difference and stop people being lonely and break the boredom of lockdown, and we did that. And actually, the comments that we received, which shows that people really did value the cultural engagement for their mental health and well-being. And it's a case that you often see in studies. It's a beneficial. Actually, now we can put people people's names to how we've benefited them and made a difference. So that's really my very quick whistle stop tour around it. Um, that's our social media accounts and stuff, and my email address if anyone wants to drop me an email.
Thank you, Damien. Amazing what you've achieved. You've also been very modest in that you failed to mention that you've been nominated for a number of awards as a result of this. Isn't that right?
Yeah, but well, we're always a bridesmaid, never the bride, so we will always get to the finals, but never quite get over the finish line. And actually, that's one of the things I slightly skipped over. Yeah, we Museum Chain Lives Award we were nominated for, and some local ones as well. And all of that's great for saying that the council keep funding us. And as many of your organisations are now getting into, and certainly I'm in this mindset at the moment, what's the funding settlement for next year going to be? And actually, we can point at the moment to really big difference we've made to local groups and organisations, and being recognised for that through getting to finals just really has been a boost for the team.
I'm going to invite other people, if they've got questions, please feel free to use the chat or put your hand up. But I've got a question actually while we're waiting. I've got two. When we chatted over the phone, you mentioned that it took some time to, I suppose, work on the council to give you these freedoms. Could you say a little bit more about that? Because I think there's some people who are still potentially a little bit hemmed in what they can do within a digital sphere.
Yeah, so as I said, probably Chatham House rules for this answer. When I arrived here, it was a new role, and the council were really looking at whether the museum should be something they bother with, and they'd decided it might be something they're interested in, but it might be something they'll end up selling and selling collections from to make money to resolve the deficit that the council has and still has. So a lot of the work I've done around advocacy and promoting that has been around showing the council what the benefit of the museum has. And it's not just a big dusty building that has lots of big dusty collections that are kept in stores, which cost lots of money. It's a place for the community. It's a place where the council can realise its social outcomes and deliver on its social impacts to improve the health and well-being of the people in the town, and that it's a hub that people can draw on. So I've spent a lot of time working with councillors, senior leadership, showing them that how the museum does deliver those corporate plans, how the museum is actually not just a discretionary service but a key service if the town wants to grow and thrive. I spend more time than I should looking at reports and things, but it's actually really important to be able to articulate these national reports into the benefits of culture and arts and museums into the local context and showing that. So so we collect quite heavily a lot of data as we went along. We screenshotted, we collected comments. Every 4 weeks we stopped and carried out a review of what we were doing, had internal discussions about whether we should continue, and then fed that back to them to give them that choice. And they always chose as a council to go with it. The other thing I would encourage you to do, without going off too much on the tangent with the answer, is to get those other organisations in the town to bat for you as well. So Arts Council, National Lottery Heritage Funds, they've all got outcomes which are very closely aligned, and especially closely aligned to councils who are about increasing life chances for people and improving the environment in which we live. Bring them together, take a proactive role in bringing those organisations into the town. For the first 6 months of my job, I spent it inviting people from Arts Council, from National Lottery, from Museums Association, from all of those sorts of groups down to the council, down to Hastings, to introduce them to the town, but also drop them into meetings with senior leaders and say, this is Arts Council. They've currently got Get Create being developed at this moment. This is how it can benefit, and having them start that conversation. Because what they do is then say, oh, the council's a really good vehicle for bringing funding in, or the council's a really good way of doing it. So it's not just your voice, but it also shows you're being proactive and not just holding your begging hand out to the council and saying, we need money from you. It's it, it's easier than what it sounds, but it just needs you to be proactive. And I think that's the key thing. Many colleagues and many museums just like to get on with things and do it and not tell people about it. But actually, you need to tell other people about it. It's a bit of Mamaroo. You've got to love yourself before you can love anyone else. You've got to go out and shout that about your museum because no one else is going to do it for you.
No, thank you, Joe. I'm really glad that you've said that. I'm going to open it to anybody else. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, I was interested in that point you made about circumventing the rules on things like the council's talk with website issue.
Yes.
Have you got any tips for us that we could take from that?
So I think it's we we're both fortunate and unfortunate. The council didn't get rid of the museum's Twitter or Facebook page, and we did have we still have a really poorly structured website, but that's all built on legacy systems. I keep making the case in meetings, our IT is not very good. There's so much more we could be doing, and ultimately the decisions are made by the councillors at cabinet. So if you can build a case with them and know how to game that situation, you can get through it. But also knowing that if you get told no, try and think of another way around it, which will get the decision to the end. Ultimately, you might have to just give up and let go and try and do it their way and show whether it works or not.
Yeah.
It's about being flexible, I think.
Thank you very much. I think there's a question in the chat there, which is from Josie, which says, do you have any tips for evaluating use, enjoyment of resources that are put out online?
We every 4 weeks, because we initially said 12 weeks for a project which ran for 24, we stopped very quickly after the first 4 weeks, because what we hadn't expected was all the digital stuff to come out of the nationals and in London and everyone, and some really high quality stuff that we just couldn't compete with. And we thought at that time, I will get to your answer. At that time, the council was facing people who were running out of foods, running out of medicine, and we were involved in those community hub calls, and the question was whether we would be better using the team to support that effort than doing what we're doing. But actually, when we looked at what people were saying and the comments that were coming back and encouraging the responses and doing activities that weren't just here's a picture of our collections, isn't that exciting, here's a video tour of our gallery, isn't that exciting, actually encouraging people to join in a discussion. So if we put pictures up, it was like, do you remember this picture, tell us a story about it. All those little comments built up to a picture that what we were doing was having benefit, and people were saying and emailing in how much difference it was making to them. So partly when you're looking at encouraging people and to give comments and see if they're enjoying it, is how you structure that activity. It's about making sure that they're actually seeing activities that they can respond to and reply to. At that 4 week period, we also launched a online evaluation of what we were doing. So we put out on all our channels. This is a link to a spreadsheet, not a spreadsheet, a SharePoint form for Smartsheet. That's the word. To give us your feedback. So we got people to feedback like that as well. I'm kind of going off tangent as well. So let me stop the screen. I can look at the questions. That's probably easy. So yeah, so I think that was how we evaluated. It becomes quite difficult because people don't people started to not respond as time went on, but the digital picture of the digital insights we could have through Facebook and Instagram and stuff told us that people were still looking at it and looking at it for longer, and more people were doing that. So understanding the insight tools that are available free on each of the platforms is important, because you might not get the comments back and the feedback that you're looking for, but if you look into the insights around people viewing and people clicking and people watching it for the amount of times and things like that, you can start to paint a picture of people engaging and working with things when they're not wanting to respond. The other thing is just being really blunt and asking them, we've done that recently. What do you want what do you want us to do? What do you want to see from us? Don't be scared to just ask those questions. And it's part of the thing is when you're doing those activities is capturing it at the time, because it is a pain going back through having to try and recapture that information or remember someone said that somewhere, because they might have deleted it, they might be on private, it might just be lost in the search function. So it's about building that in as you go. I can now see the questions, which is good.
Thanks, Damien. I think there's a question from Alina, which is, how are you using digital now and what are your engagement plans for the future? I know we can't plan. Is there a digital fatigue or do you have the same high levels of engagement?
So we coincidentally had signed up for a digital mentoring course just before lockdown, which started in August. So we used that to develop a digital strategy because we'd never bothered. We just put stuff out on Facebook because that's what you do. We tweeted because that's what you do. But we at the end of the Digital Museum, we didn't want to come under. I didn't want to come under pressure for the team to be chucking out or churning out lots of digital activity when we were also running a socially distanced museum, because the two are incompatible with the size of a team we have. So we developed a digital strategy, which was a really pared back version, but still meant that each week we knew what we were doing on each of the platforms. We know how much we're going to be posting, we know what type of posts we're going to be doing. And that's what we started to roll out. So we were just getting into the swing of that, and then another lockdown hit. But as part of we'd planned for another lockdown, fortunately, and that was we wouldn't do any major digital museum activities for the first 4 weeks of a lockdown, because we thought the lockdown would probably be local, it'd probably be quite small scale, so we wouldn't want to jump into it. And part of those plans were we thought we might still have the museum operating somehow within that lockdown. We didn't expect what we're in now. So at the moment, we are we're just, in fact, today or tomorrow we'll launch 4 activities that we'll do over the 4 weeks, the next 3 or 4 weeks, one activity roughly a week based on those audiences, but all developed in-house. Because when we set up or we reopened, we spent all the money that we had left in the budget. We are running on, as everyone is, running on empty now. We are waiting on some funding coming from Arts Council. We put in a grant, a project grant. So if that comes off, we'll do more freelancer activity. But at the moment, our since ending the digital museum, our digital engagement has dropped because we're not producing the same amount of activity. But actually, our figures are far, far, far above what they were before. I think they're 2 or 3 times higher on average than what we were receiving previously to, and the statistics we've got before. So that's working out around 70, 80,000 impressions per month on Twitter, 30, so 1,000, I might be making this up now, 30,000 I think on Facebook, and on Instagram it's only, because they've not had that the longest, that's the newest one, it's about 8,000. Before, as I said, last year for the whole year with 100,000 across all of our social media, so it's massively up on it.
Thanks, Damien. I also thought it was really interesting you're saying that you use freelancers to work around. Is that something that you're going to continue to do?
Yeah, so if we get the funding from Arts Council, we'll do that. That's core to our plan. We don't actually, with the technology we're using to do the digital museum is PowerPoint, MS Paint, and whatever else we can find on the computer. The council haven't invested in, and they're not going to invest in any fancy programs or Adobe or things like that for us, because we're not the design team, which is an ongoing debate. But freelancers are key to that. If we want to produce really high quality activities that are, all singing, all dancing, and show a really good high quality product, we need to invest in freelancers to do that, because the council, we don't have the equipment to do that. We can produce some really nice short videos, we can do some really nice quality things, but we can't really do the more advanced side of it. And in supporting the freelance ecology in this area in Hastings, we've got a very large freelance creative community, so it's important to support that, especially as they were missed so badly by the funds and things that came out earlier in the year. We want to keep that going.
How do you think the council look at you now?
Yeah, they look at, well, until lockdown came and they started talking about budget, I was all happy. But they look at us, as I said, central to what they want to achieve for the social ambitions of the town, and that's kind of their phrase. That's why it's a bit wordy. They won't consider anything, doing anything in town without coming and asking. So if they want to do a project in the town, they'll come and ask me or someone in the team around how we do that. If they're looking at things, we're one of the town deal areas, so because there might be funding, they've came to us around, can you be on the project team and sit on that? So we have a much increased presence across internal teams in the council, projects, and on delivering things. The council, when they're doing their residents' email weekly, will come each week, coming to us, what can we do from the museum? It's totally changed. When I first started, they were, who's at the museum, what are they doing, why have we got a museum, why are we keeping these collections that are worth lots of money when we've got a deficit? Those conversations are not happening. They've not been mentioned in 18 months at least. So they're really looking forward to it. I'd say we're kind of getting the opposite end now. They're expecting too much. So a lot of my time now is actually, there's me, 3 part-time curators, 1 full-time museum education officer in the front of house team. That we're the people doing it. That if you want us to do more, you need to invest in it. If you want more digital activity, you need to put funding in for us to do that. And obviously the budgets are such that we can't do that. So it's interesting. We're not quite we're not quite as the leisure team. The leisure team, because everyone loves a bit of running around and everyone sees the value of that automatically, that exercise is good for mental health. We're making the case, and we're starting to win the case on cultural activity and meaningful activity being just as, not more important, I'll get in trouble for that, just as important as physical activity.
They go hand in hand. Camilla's asked, which directorate are you in?
We are in the Regeneration and Culture Directorate, and within that directorate, I also head up the culture team, which is as grandiose as that sounds, as me and 1 vacant post. So it's, before I started, we were part of Seafront Services, and I think they were managed by the bins team. So it's the council have taken note and reorganised us into the right direction. I've worked in other in Eastbourne, we were in the Seafront Services, but they got it as well, that culture and museums were important. I think it depends. What I've found for this council isn't really directorate, it's much more about the officer. If you can get the officer and the senior officers in particular on board, that's going to win it. It doesn't particularly matter. People like to be in the right directorate, but actually I'd much rather people that get is what we're doing and support us.
I mean, it's been really, really fascinating. I want to thank you for your time. Is there anything that you want to close with or leave us to think about before we? I want you to go and take some time, because I understand how busy you are.
I've got some loan agreements to negotiate. It's fine. No, I think just thank you for inviting me. I think it's I hadn't expected when we set out back in March to be doing, talking and saying how great it's been, because it's been good, and it has been surprisingly good, but it was difficult and really hard work. I think when doing this presentation, just seeing how much the team done and delivered over that period is it's like, we actually done that. That's really impressive, and it's just in a public way, just to say to my team, thank you. I know none of them are here, but if you ever see them, this was really down. It wasn't just a one person; it was their effort and hard work that done it, and it takes a team to deliver it. So thank you to them, and thank you for listening to my weird ramblings on a Wednesday morning.
Well, thank you, Damien. It's really, it's incredibly positive, and I think that's what we need. It's really, really appreciate you sharing your story. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to continue with the session and let everybody know actually that the way I came in contact with Damien actually was somebody within his team highlighted the great work that was happening when I was gathering some case studies for the local government association, which I'm very pleased to say was just the report that I put together was released yesterday. So please do have a look at it. The objective of that work was essentially to do many of the things that Damien was talking about in advocating your service and highlighting how valuable culture, sport and leisure are. So it is all of them together, and it's not that anyone is more important than the other. So I'm going to share with you, if that's okay, a short video that's been put to demonstrate that. The COVID-19 pandemic has led to many of us spending more time at home. During the first lockdown, people sang and danced in the streets. They brightened their communities with rainbows and rallied around to support the most vulnerable in society. Culture and leisure has played a vital role in bringing together local communities. It has helped us to stay connected, share experiences, and take care of each other. From virtual gyms, streamed rhyme time sessions, and lamppost artwork, to theatres operating as food banks and leisure staff taking shielding calls. Arts, culture and leisure have provided many with a lifeline during this pandemic. Spending on culture and leisure is not a luxury. It is vital to our well-being, our communities and the economic future of our local areas. No, I'm sure that they are all messages that all of you here are familiar with. But I think if Damien, one of the key things that to me that Damien highlighted is the need to keep telling people and to keep reminding people of how important that work is. And I in some ways there's an open door that's been left by the pandemic to highlight all the amazing work that's been happening. Ooh, so the impact of COVID, I think we're all play from start. A little bit weary of the impact, but the one thing that I keep coming back to, and I do this throughout, I've done so throughout all my career, and it's perhaps because I started as a teacher, is I refer back to Maslow's hierarchy. And you may have seen this, some of you, but it's a hierarchy of needs, which in recent times people have added Wi-Fi to the very bottom of it. I've not done that in this instance. But it's what we need in order to move on and to progress as people. And the reason that I think it's so important actually to reflect on it right now is because COVID has, to my mind, impacted so much of these basic needs: our food, our water, our warmth, our security, and our safety. I think those things have been completely rocked. And without those things, it's not possible to move further up it. Developing relationships and having a sense of accomplishment becomes even harder. Here is my little scribbling early on in the pandemic of how I felt COVID was impacting upon our world. And it was in some ways fueling suspicion, judgment, fear, and anxiety. And not giving us all the things that I've got on the other side, which is joy, hope, rewards, and praise. But thankfully, we all work in a sector where those things are what you do. I'm not going to go through the headlines from the OECD. I might have time to come back to these later. I'm going to skip to the impact on local services while it's still fresh in our minds, and I think especially from what Damien was talking about. And I have pulled out just a few. I've picked out some priorities which I have found from the work that I've done in gathering case studies. Now, while I've done that throughout the whole of England, I don't think that these are unique or specifically related to a national picture. I think they will apply equally in London. Yvette has made it has asked me to make sure that there is a London skew to this. It might just be that there's slightly different contexts to digital exclusion. And one of the, to any of these really, just actually on the digital exclusion, I had always understood digital exclusion to mean people who didn't have any access to digital equipment, and that apparently is not the case. There's a group who are campaigning for greater digital access. Of course, I can't find the name of the group. I will do that while we're in the breakout rooms. But one of the things that they highlight is it's the quality of access. So it's not just about whether somebody has a laptop or a phone, it's what they're actually engaging with. Are they just using it to go on Facebook and Twitter and nothing else? And what they've done is they have decided that people who aren't using it for richer purposes, and I'm not going to it's probably a whole area of debate as to what that means, but it's not as simple as people not having the tools. Before I get you to feedback, I have reference I was making to the digital exclusion is the very nicely titled Good Things Foundation. And they have, they've put together a digital blueprint even. And I do like a nice infographic, as Yvette and Tina know. And here they have some really interesting information about the digital divide. And interesting to know that there's 9 people who cannot use the internet with it. 9 million, not 9. We might think there's only 9 people who can't use the internet, but in fact there's 9 million people who can't use the internet without any help, and 7 million who have no internet access at home, which I think when you're making the case for libraries, or as part of a shared service, it does highlight how important it is. And again, I know we're focusing on London today, but there is some regional disparity across these figures as well, with the north being harder hit. So those 18% to 53 is the difference in digital engagement. So one to perhaps look at when you get a moment. It's a very good point, and I wonder if that's something that came up within any of the other groups. I think there's a really interesting point made about how do you reach isolated people when they're isolated. Stating the obvious, but one that needs serious consideration. I appreciate they're very big headings, and it's quite a challenging task to take those on within the time frame that we have. But what I wanted us to do was to just spend a few minutes thinking about what potentially council priorities would be, and how museums and archives are best placed to respond to them. Interesting hearing about what you've all been doing, because within the responses that you sent to Yvette, thank you, it was really helped me to see where you are now. I know these are small numbers of responses, but I think they're still fairly reflective of what's been happening. So we have 3 people saying that they reopened and 3 didn't. And I think within that, it's worth bearing in mind that some museums and archives have opened maybe for a day and then had to close again. There is one that I know of that opened for 1 day. Some have, opened for a longer period of time and closed again. But there is no one universal picture for everybody. The offers that you talked about that you're thinking about providing to the people are exhibitions, sessions for children and young people, talks, films, virtual tours, story times, bingos. And I know in Redbridge, I don't think this came back in the survey, but they were doing murder mysteries. There's a huge range of what's on offer. And these are some of the plans that you've told me you've got in place. So it's expanding your offer for schools, community groups, education, family events, potentially exhibitions, and a minimal program for adults on site. Loan boxes and blended learning for schools, events and exhibitions, engagement to develop and deliver a national lottery project, hopefully reopening of physical exhibitions, the museum and archive, virtual learning sessions with local schools, new permanent exhibition opening in 2021, co-curating sessions, feeding into it, new museum, starting a year-long funded project. I thought this was particularly interesting, and we're keen to use our heritage service to help the community repair after COVID, which hit Brent badly in the first wave. And I'm going to pause on this for a moment, because one of the things that I was really conscious of when talking to a vet about bringing everyone together today was, I think we're all guilty of this. It's very easy to plan and program as if nothing has happened. And I have seen numerous job descriptions, project descriptions, which have been outlined in a way that you would think that nothing, that, you know, it was the world as it was a year ago. And to me, yeah, it's not doing yourself any favors. It's not doing your museums, your services, or your visitors any favors to try and operate in that way. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that with everybody. I'm going to just briefly run through some of the challenges and opportunities that you've fed back. These were in no ways surprising. The challenges being uncertainty, and I think they also reflect some of the things that Damien spoke about earlier on. Working within a council to sign off when everything takes a really long time. A few people mentioned this, and somebody mentioned that it takes 3 months to get anything online, which is a very long time. Ensuring people feel it's safe to visit, lack of staff resources and digital expertise, exactly the same challenges as were there before COVID. Getting as much support and recognition as the other services, and being able to offer partners enough incentive. Continued social distancing, limiting events and activities, a limit on the number of people who can engage with exhibitions, reduced staff capacity if furlough is extended, which we now know it will be, developing a Zoom-friendly and less hands-on session that keeps people engaged, potential technical issues, limits on public programming, and a loss of dedicated spaces. And I have to, you guys were brilliant at coming up with the challenges. I only have one slide for the opportunities, and that was increased digital engagement in this climate, also a new focus on creativity, reaching people who perhaps not been able to reach before COVID, reaching wider audience, trying new things, keeping audiences informed and involved with the museum while we're closed, and welcoming schools back virtually. To be honest, I think there's more than that, and what has really struck me from not just what Damien was talking about, but what's come out of the breakout sessions, and I think Ruth just made the point of how the role that museums and archives have to play in helping communities to heal, and you all have a role to play within that. And what I'd like you to do for the next 2 minutes is to think about what that role is, and if you can share that in the chat function, I'd really appreciate it. Beth, I'm gonna ask you if you've had time to think about what your role is.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously we've had continued engagement, albeit virtually, and that's been really useful. But it's trying to find ways, I think, for us as MDOs to maintain that ongoing conversation with organisations, you know, despite the fact that organisations are having to juggle going in and out of periods of restriction. And I think that that's going to be the main thing for us, you know, is sort of trying to maintain those sort of support networks. Certainly one thing that was very heartening, I think, as part of our lockdown response was the actual ability to do virtual network meetings has been actually helpful. I think the virtual meetings for networks are probably something that we will continue with, because they do work better, because obviously, you know, the logistics of people physically getting to meetings when they're all coming from different parts of London can be very difficult. So so there are some positives for us, I think, that we will need to carry forward. Yeah, and that's certainly one of them. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Rachel, from your perspective as.
Yeah, so I've been supporting quite a number of museums, particularly up sort of July, August time as schools were about to reopen, around looking at how to repurpose things that they already had in their pool, their basket of activities, and whether those could be delivered online or in a different way. So we spent a long time as museums talking about repurposing some of their family activities for school activities and vice versa. So, what activities are you running in your school's activities that actually families could enjoy either virtually or online, virtually or on site, if you were reopening. And a lot of opportunities around sort of this walking sort of around pool of audience. So who's in your direct walking distance to your museums, and how possibly you've never engaged with them before, and sort of ways that we could engage. I know from the chat talk, Miller was talking about activity drops, as was Josie. I've done a lot of work around, particularly with the London Museum of Water and Steam, around they have sort of council estate right by them. Most of those families are not engaging. So is there a way that they could put activity packages together and sort of start engaging with them? They are fortunate enough to were fortunate enough to be able to open the outdoor space before they opened their internal spaces. So actually that was a way they did the drop, and then they were encouraging them to come to the outdoor space to engage with the families. And that was quite a nice opportunity for them that they hadn't really thought about before, because of that sort of really local audience that not engaging. And I know Florence Nightingale are in a similar position, looking at that walking distance, which has been another opportunity for quite a number of museums.
Thank you very much for that, Rachel. So those have helped increase confidence in getting out into public spaces, activities that have been a nice distraction. And I think on that, I think it's Alina who shared that. I'm going to share something with you which I think hopefully will resonate. I think working within museums and archives, there's a tendency to think of what we do as being a nice addition, something that's nice to have, and it's so much more than that. And I think it's important that when it's being framed within, I think, as Damien mentioned earlier, within council discussions and within the priorities that they're grappling with, it's presenting it in terms of actually what we do does help to address digital isolation. It does help to kind of reach out to people who are feeling excluded. It absolutely is something that will help people if they're, trying to come back from work. There's so much more that's on offer, and it's about presenting the services not being an additional activity. I've got Camilla saying supporting partner organisations who are actively seeking groups and able to fund them. It's really nice to see the positive sides come through. I'm going to leave you with a few what I've called planning key considerations. And this is, what I'm hoping that for some of you who perhaps have not yet come back, or are at this point at which you're thinking, right, where do we go to now? Hopefully these questions are helpful, which is, why are you doing this? Who is it for? What impact will it have? How, when, and when will you do it? And to go back to the point that I made earlier about seeing every so often projects or programs that where there hasn't been a pause to stop and ask these questions. I think it's helpful for you and everybody that's working with you, and will most certainly speak to the councils. So this is my neat summary in terms of yeah, I appreciate that I've hopefully given you quite a lot to think about. But if I was to distill it down into 4 key areas, it's forecasting, filtering, focus, and looking after yourself first. I think we've all heard of the phrase of put on your own mask before you attend to others. And somebody mentioned that to me a couple of days ago, and I think it's very easy to overlook it, especially at the moment. But it's not something that should be taken lightly. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't think we're making enough me time, and unless we've taken that time out, then we can't step back to really do the other 3 things that I've just mentioned, which was step back to forecast, to filter out what priorities you can respond to focus your programming on those areas. You come first, and that's yeah. You can that way you can continue to do the amazing work you've been doing. And what I'd like you to do is to share with us all one word, your plan in one word. And here's me. So Yvette's got kindness, got reflect, access, walking. I like that one, Colin. Inclusion, well-being, reaching, be brave, involve. Great. Talk. Nice one, Hayley. Rachel, what was yours? Talking as well. And act. Excellent. Start. Still here. Reopen. Good one, Mark. I was personally really inspired by hearing from Damien and hearing about all your stories, and I just wish we'd had more time to cover off what you were all doing. I know I'm working with Yvette to do a follow-up session. Thank you very much, everyone.
Really great to see you all here and to hear what you're all up to, and yeah, we're very happy to carry on the conversations. And just to remind you all that we did do a very good session right at the beginning with Susan Royce on alternative futures, and that was when we were really getting to grips with the technology, and that's now available on our YouTube channels, because there are a few tools on there that you might find helpful with your planning. Yeah, and I think it also links to the session we did recently on contemporary collecting, and that was really fascinating, because one of the things that people really brought to the fore in that discussion was that this is a long-term thing, you know, this is not short-term. And in terms of how it, and I think that links to what we were saying about trying to address some of the community issues, because, you know, it was pointed out that, you know, for example, we're still collecting material that relates to things like the First World War, you know, diaries and things that are coming to light that families haven't felt able to share because they're just too painful. And presumably there will be similar issues emerging from, you know, families who've gone through traumatic issues as part of this current pandemic. So this is a long-term thing that we'll need to be thinking about for, you know, many years to come, and how we deal with the stories that emerge, and that presumably also links to how we tackle issues around the impacts on communities and individuals. I mean, it'd be interesting to know from the things that you have been doing over this current period, what you've found to be the most successful things that you've offered. Are there any thoughts you can share with others about that?
It's a shame that we're not going to hear from Barnsley, because they've done some really interesting things in that respect of Yeah, they did a virtual trip down memory lane. And they've done online bingo, but I didn't quite appreciate what the virtual trip down memory lane was, and then until I looked into it, and they basically you board the bus at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then they take you to the old Barnsley markets.
Oh, great.
And it's really, really lovely the way that they've presented it. I'm also kind of thinking as well at the same time, you might not be getting much in terms of feedback, but people are there and they're tuned in, so people will access it in many different ways.
Yeah. Can I just say on behalf of everybody, thank you very much, Mairead. It was a really interesting session. Thank you all very much for joining us.